Hey folks, welcome back to the channel, your home for all content, Lord of the Rings home. I made a predictions video for 2024, but now I want to do a video about things that I want. A little bit of a wish list about things I would love to see in the game, hopefully in the year 2024, but I'm not so sure we're going to see much of it. Maybe we'll get a few of these things. And the first thing I want to talk about are characters. It is a hero collector, so I want to talk about some of the characters I want to see come to the game first and foremost in 2024. And we're going to start off with the rest of the Fellowship. By rest of the Fellowship, I mean Aragorn and Boromir. And I know there is definitely some contention about, well, Strider's already in the game. That's the non-legendary version of Aragorn. If they add Aragorn, it should be a legendary version. I think we will get a legendary version of Aragorn at some point. I don't know if the Fellowship version is necessarily legendary. I think that's probably, I mean, that is what is up for debate, basically. So of the Fellowship I would like to see that would come into the game that would maybe round out a Gandalf squad would be Boromir and Aragorn. Again, that would probably mean that we would see definitely duplicate characters. I think we will also see maybe a Frodo in there as well. So we will get our first duplicate characters. I think the Fellowship is probably the best, like, you know, group of people to get your first set of duplicate characters. I'm not particularly interested in seeing a Hobbit Fellowship squad at the moment, although I do think that that will be interesting down the line. There are 9 people in the Fellowship, though, and so I'm wondering if we will eventually get some sort of what-if version of a character to round it out to 10, or maybe, you know, we'll get something like Gollum or, yeah, that will kind of work with Sam and Frodo maybe pretty well, and then you can kind of round out who else you want in that squad based on the other side of the Fellowship. That's what I want from Fellowship. Aragorn and Boromir, that's personally what I want. Again, that's just what I want personally. It's not a judgment on anything other than that, and it's not a prediction, although I do think the Fellowship should be coming out sooner rather than later. Let's move on to the next one. I think this is a pretty obvious choice, and I feel like there's actually a good number of people who agree with me here. I want to see King Theoden in the game. Again, I don't know whether... I'm not sure I care whether he is legendary or not at the moment. I think we will eventually get a legendary version of him, but I would like to see King Theoden come into the game. We already have like a weird, like the weakened version of Theoden in the game files, and like, you know, it's got a character UI and that sort of thing. I'm not as interested in that. I think that's a cool thing to have down the road, but I would like to see just a regular King Theoden first and foremost. And I think there's a good possibility that we see that this year with, you know, the War of the Rohirrim movie coming later on. I think there's a good, you know, shot that that's the case. An interesting thing as well, right? I think everybody knows the Rohan 3, and you don't really use Aldred. Not a lot of people use Aldred and Wilfwyn to kind of round out that team. So there's definitely 2 slots open there that I think King Theoden could definitely step into and hopefully replace Eowyn's leadership, because it's not very good. Anyway, this is something I really think a lot of people want to see. And you know what? Actually, while you're watching the video, just go put down in the comments below some of the characters that you want to see come into the game. And then we're going to transition into some other things towards the end, quality of life stuff, game modes, that sort of stuff. But start off with characters. The last light side character that I want to see added to the game is something I hope is the first large light side character, which is Treebeard. I would like to see just generally Ents in general. I think Treebeard makes the most sense. We've talked about this before on the channel. It's hard to do a full Ent team, right? Because I think they would pretty much be considered large characters, and you can't have 5 large characters. I do think it would be really awesome to kind of pick and choose, though, and then later on build out some more of the Ent stuff, right? With named, unnamed characters like the Haradrim squad, for instance. But you could have that. You could have Ent wives. I think that would be a really cool direction to take the game. They said it wasn't on their like near-term sort of map back in last year, but that it was definitely a possibility. I'm hoping it comes in 2024. Let's switch to shadow characters. And I think this is probably another classic pick I think a lot of people want to see. I want to see more wargs. I think there's an actual legitimate option that they could do more wargs, especially if they decide to go like sort of a Gundabad or orc route for doing more shadow characters in the near term here. I just want to have a full Warg squad, go to the dog pound. I think that would just be a lot of fun to have in the game. Nick Reinhardt, the game director, did say when he was sort of talking about their roadmap for the next year, what they have sort of laid out, that they were sort of chasing some cool things. And I think that this is one of the, just the Warg in general, I think is a really cool thing to chase and have in game. And I think it's been received very well. I like the Warg kit. I haven't quite built him up on either of my accounts, but I like the way that they introduced the Warg. All right, let's talk about another one. I think we will get a spider at some point, and I think it could be related to Dol Guldur, the necromancer, basically, right? Sauron, when he was at Dol Guldur, started breeding these spiders in there, basically taking over Mirkwood, is my understanding, right? I think that would be a really interesting way to slot in a large character. If it worked with the Dol Guldur faction, that would be really awesome as well. Let's get the spiders going, right? I think they're a decently large part of the Lord of the Rings universe. I like reading about the Ungoliant and, you know, that whole part of the Lord of the Rings lore. I think this is a good direction to take it because, yes, you're going to maybe have to deal with the same problem you have with Ents, where you can't have too many large characters. But I think there's maybe some possible ways to work around that with the spiders. You could maybe just not make them as large. However, they did say that there would be a shadow large character that would fit into a squad into an interesting way that hopefully will be coming soon. This is what I hope it is. I would like to see a spider come to the game. I think that would be really awesome. And with how good they are making the kits thematic, I'll give you a little spoiler there. I think that this would also present a good way, you know, just some interesting mechanics in the game. So excited for that. All right. This is my last character that I want to talk about before we move on to game modes. It's Saruman. I would like to see Saruman come to the game. He is pictured here making parlays on NFL games, or sorry, basketball games, whichever one works for you, and getting all of the right choices. So I think it would be a really cool way to have, not like Hobbit Saruman before he's like completely corrupted or whatnot, but definitely evil Saruman. Give the shadow side a little bit of a boost. I think that would make complete sense. You know, he can have interactions with the Dunlin, he can have interactions with the orcs. I think it would just be really awesome as sort of a good juxtaposition against Gandalf, and people starting in the next few months here, either having gotten Gandalf or starting to unlock Gandalf or being close to unlocking Gandalf. I think this would be a really cool legendary to then put out to kind of, you know, oppose them, right? You got the two wizards battling it out. Very reminiscent of the scene in The Two Towers from the Peter Jackson movie, right? That's what I want. I want that sort of, that to play out in the game. All right. Yes. Hero Collector. Those are the heroes I want to come to the game. It's sort of my 2024 wish list, but let's talk about game modes. I don't care if it's guild versus guild. I don't care if it's some sort of territory battles where it's just like another guild PvE type mode. I want Helms Deep in some form or another to come to this game. We have this wide sweeping fantastical landscape set up and written by Tolkien, right? This fantastical world, and inside of that world, these massive sweeping battles that proved to be very cinematic in nature when they made movies about it. I think when you think about Lord of the Rings, when you talk to people about Lord of the Rings, especially maybe not people who are like very into the lore, but just like your casual Lord of the Rings enjoyer, right? What is one of the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, the Battle of Helm's Deep. I want to see them do this in the game. I really like how they laid out the Mines of Moria graphically, that sort of interface. I think they did a really good job, and I think they could do an equally good job by setting up the Helm's Deep in a meaningful way. This is one of the things I want out of a Lord of the Rings game. I just remember growing up, watching the Lord of the Rings movies, and then playing Lord of the Rings video games, and doing anything in Helm's Deep was like my absolute favorite. So personally, this is really, really what I want. Let's switch over to talking about multi-squad PvP. I'll switch to the game here, if it'll load. Well, it doesn't really matter. I'll continue to talk while it loads. I want multi-squad PvP to be good, and one thing I want to mention that I've been thinking about a little bit, there's this kind of they said that multi-squad PvP was going to be daily, and that is something that has stuck with me since they said it. because right now the way that they do this type of system in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, the other CG game, right, is they kind of do it every other day. So like you can do your defense setting up and sort of scouting, that sort of thing against your opponent one day, and then you sort of move and do the attack phase the second day. And so it's every other day. They said they wanted to move it to daily. What I've realized is I don't know what they mean by that. Do they mean, is setting your defenses and doing the scouting considered like a daily activity for this? Or do they want you to do both the defensive placement and the attacking in one day? I'm not sure. I'm very eager for it, though. I do think it'll be the next game mode. I think it will be coming in Q1. Again, okay, this is not a predictions video. This is a wish list video. I have to keep reminding myself of that. I want multi-squad PvP to be good because I think that could really make or break the game for a lot of people. We need to phase out Arena. I think people who got into Shard 1 and didn't spend a lot of money, people who are free to play, are sick and tired of being in Shard 1, which, by the way, is still an incredibly active Shard. Right? A lot of those people, it's probably because of sunken cost fallacy, a lot of those people have stuck around and are continuing to play the game. We got to mix it up. I want to switch to a league system. I want to not see the same people. I want to figure out what is good, what is not good in PvP, right? I mean, that's the big problem with Arena. You have a defensive team, and it's either also your offensive team or you just have an offensive team. And that sort of limits thinking about the game in another dimension in terms of PvP. So that needs to come out definitely before Guild versus Guild so that you can kind of feel out the waters for counters, not counters. I want multi-squad to be really good. I'm curious how they're going to mix it up, how they're going to make it different than Swigo. Is it going to just be the same? I hope it's a little bit different, a little bit more thematic, placed in the container of the Lord of the Rings universe. Make it thematically, make a little bit more sense. Okay. That's what those are the big game modes that I want in 2024. Let's talk about quality of life features. I can just sort of rattle some off. They've talked about it, right? They released Glyphs without all of the quality of life stuff attached to it. I think that is something that they are still working on. It is something I would like to see in 2024. That is on my wish list. We need glyph quality of life. I don't want to have to press 4 buttons to sell one glyph. I want to be able to mass sell glyphs, mass upgrade glyphs, have better control over my glyphs, set loadouts so that I can actually easily swap glyphs to different teams in different chapters of the raid, make that more of a viable strategy for the average player than, not doing that and having to remember which glyphs you put on and writing stuff down or taking screenshots. I just don't want to do that. So glyph quality of life, and this is going to be a hot take. I actually think glyph quality of life should come before any sort of save squad feature. I actually don't think the save squad feature is necessary at the moment. I think personally, so like if we just go to the raids here, I mean, I have no need for a save squad function in Arena because of course not, but I actually think that this previous attempts button here sort of shows you what you did last time. I think that this is definitely satisfactory for raids at the moment. When multi-squad PvP comes out, I do think that there will be a save squad function that needs to come with it, and then that should be a priority. But at the moment, I think glyph quality of life kind of trumps that. One other thing I think while we're here in the raids, I think a good quality of life feature that I still think is good, even post glyphs, will be banking a score, basically. So you can do a run, bank a score, and then you can use that run later, that score later, so that, okay, I'm going to see if I can get a higher score, but if I can't, I'm just going to use my banked run, and then I'm good. So that way, if you don't have to worry about, like, okay, was that the perfect run? Or am I going to have to spend, 2 more hours getting the perfect RNG to even approach that? I think that would actually alleviate a lot of the frustration that people have with the raid. I know, to me, the RNG seems to decrease significantly, both with the Chapter 1 changes and now that we have Glyphs. I think that there are ways to really mitigate the RNG. I still think it's a problem for a lot of people, and I think that this is a very, very good way to mitigate that. So that's one thing I want to see. There's another thing, a few other things. This 4-hour chest here, which I think is great, I think it needs to have the characters that become farmable automatically placed into it. That's another one of mine that I think is, it's not high on the list, but I think it just eventually needs to happen here. Let's get the characters in there that have become farmable so people can start getting shards for them. Challenge shop obviously needs to be fixed. That's something I'm on my wish list. new campaigns and ways for free-to-play players to get epic ability materials and purple essences for G9 and G10 on my wish list. In-game patch notes on my wish list. They post stuff on the website, like kit reveals and stuff, but they don't actually post the patch notes on the website. They only do that in the Discord, and then they leave it to people like me to disseminate that information out, which, sure, thank you very much, but there's actually a good chunk of people who aren't on the Discord who don't watch YouTube videos, right? And I think that they should have access to that information via some sort of in-game mail, or maybe something that directs them to the website that also has the list of patch notes. Let's see. The last thing I want in this game, my wish list for 2024, is the ability to pet the Warg. If we're going to get more than one Warg, we should also be able to pet all of the Wargs. Let me find him. Oh, it's all the way at the bottom. That's what W is. We should, in this menu, be able to click and pet the Warg. I think that is a legitimate use of CG's resources, and I would like to see it come to the game. But let me know what you all think, what you want to see come to the game in 2024. Again, trying to make sure it's a wish list, not a predictions thing. Sometimes it's hard to get out of that mindset. But I think that's all from me. Thanks for watching, and take it easy.